Hello and welcome to Read Becca. Today let's talk about Bewilderment by Richard Powers. I previously had read The Overstory by Richard Powers and really enjoyed it. This one, likewise, I did enjoy. Giving that as a caveat, I should say, because I do have some pretty major criticisms about this one. But going in, no matter how negative I get, keep in mind I did actually like this book. So this book is all about Theo, who is an astrobiologist studying exoplanets, and his son Robin, who is autistic. They are both grieving the loss of their wife and mother, Alyssa, who was an environmental lawyer. So you can see that both of the parents have a very strong lean towards science and nature, and they really instilled that in Robin. Robin has an existing kind of empathy for the natural world and is very concerned about climate change and animal extinction. So Robin is struggling because of the loss of his mother, and because of that, people begin to pressure Theo to start putting him on medication or treating him in some way, and Theo doesn't react well to that. We see throughout this novel that he reacts inappropriately, really. He kind of lashes out to authority figures in his son's life or his own life who are trying to tell him how to raise his son, which is kind of funny because we see Robin is getting kind of penalized for the lashing out he's doing because it's socially inappropriate, and his dad doesn't quite have the same level of consequences that he does. That's a really interesting thing. He really doesn't think that medicating is the way to go for his son, and so he ends up turning to a connection that he has with an experimental research project on neurofeedback, and gets his son involved in this neurofeedback research where he is kind of training emotional empathy and emotional aptitude. And that research is really what sets off the major plot of this novel, and how Robin changes as a result of this. And it really opens him up to a connectedness with the world. And so we get a really big focus on Robin's wonder for the natural world. And Robin begins getting increasingly interested in activism, but in the sort of ways that you think of a child doing that. It's a lot of hard moments where, he is selling pictures he's drawn at a farmer's market, or standing alone picketing at the Capitol. And so he is struggling with the fact that other people don't feel the cause the same way he does. There's a lot of elements of the real world in this story as well. At one point, something that really inspires him is a character who is very clearly aligned with Greta Thunberg, who is like a viral sensation. I think there are even some actual quotes of the real person used in this. So there are very thinly veiled real world references. Of course, this is taking place in a near future, and that near future has an administration in the US that is either Trump or Trump-like. And that creates a conflict between this nature and climate concern and an administration that is really pushing against science funding, against environmentalism, and anti-climate change. That is the main source of conflict in this book, I think. But I really cared about the interpersonal conflicts more. And that is interesting because Theo is kind of an unlikable character. And I've seen a lot of people that I think read this very literally for his character, and I don't read it that way. My reading of this is that he is a very frustrated father. So I don't think he's anti-science or anti-medicine at all in resisting doing medical treatment whatsoever. I mean, obviously he's turning to a scientific experimentation. He's clearly pro-science, but I think that at a point early in the book, he out of frustration, refers to the fact that the diagnosis has changed multiple times, and makes comments about the fact that it's a spectrum. And obviously the way that works is everybody is on it. So he's very dismissive about autism in general in his outbursts, and he has lots of outbursts, and there are moments throughout this where they're treated as ridiculous by the person he's interacting with, and I think that's a way of downplaying and saying this is not the opinion of the book, clearly. So that is something that has happened within my own lifetime, that I've gone from an Asperger's to high-functioning autism to autism spectrum disorder, and that is very frustrating. I've felt that frustration. So there is this level of frustration that science has neglected mental disorder until very recently, that is a rapidly changing field that we're really grappling with, that we know so little and are so underfunding. So I think that is a big source of frustration for him. And I do wish that that had been explored a lot more about his character and how he's engaging with that. So some other issues that I had with his character are that really he doesn't seem to be self-aware. And really the author doesn't seem maybe self-aware about how privileged his character is, if I can use the word. The job trajectories for him and his wife are ridiculous. We don't know exactly how far out it is from here, but I'm assuming at most he would be in his 30s right now, probably much younger. And based on the age that they are, I don't see how he's able to just drop work. He does complain occasionally about not being able to drop work, but he's able to accommodate this son's special needs in many ways that are just absurd. The fact that he's not concerned about a mountain of debt alone is a really big disconnect. So you can tell this is written by someone that has not recently experienced entering the workforce at all. So that is one thing. The other thing is that he never has the self-awareness. There is a big element to this about how unaccommodating the world is, and I think I will get to that next, but he never has the thought of, wow, I have the job and the connections and the flexibility to accommodate my child. How much more is the world unaccommodating of a person who doesn't have that, a person who is in poverty, a person who is in a marginalized group? And it just never takes that even few seconds to ponder his position. So in terms of the unaccommodating world, I think that is really the core of what this book is getting at, for me anyway. We have the obvious narrative where it's his autistic child that is not being accommodated by the world. He doesn't think that his son needs medication. All of these issues that are happening are because the world refuses to change to allow for his son to be himself. And at one point he is having an interaction about medicating a child, and the person is kind of reassuring him about how many children are taking these medications. And he responds, well, if that many children are on these medications, there's clearly something not working. Which is true. I think that's true of children or adults. We have looked at that very much in the past year, as people, or a little more than a year, as people are increasingly unable to emotionally cope with the world that they're living in, and the situation of high stress that we're all under. And we have seen that this world is very much unaccommodating. So this expands and connects that to the natural world. At one point early on, they are talking about this encounter with a wild animal, basically. And so when they do that, they liken it to an alien, and how humans are searching for alien life, but truly we are surrounded by life that we don't know, don't understand, that we've failed to understand, that we try to sanitize in order to suit us. We put it into zoos, and we destroy habitats, and we put it into factory farms. And so we have this wonder all around us that we could be interfacing with in the same way we think of alien life. And the world is not accommodating beings that are different from the human majority, is really where that's going, I think. And I found that a very interesting discussion. I don't think there is a big part of this that's actually about alien life. It's really about our connectedness with the rest of the world and the natural world around us. So I think the blurbs of this oversell the idea that Theo and his son are like taking these imaginary trips to other planets. They do that. That takes place in between chapters, and they just imagine these other planets together. And that's interesting. It's a nice break from the plot, but I don't think it plays a huge part here. For me, what's much more interesting is that connectedness with the natural world. So that, I think, takes me into the two big criticisms that I had about this. The first being really that in a book about the interconnectedness of all things, this really devolves toward the end into political conflict that is extremely us versus them. It's very, they're the bad guys, we're the good guys. And I think in part that could be the character focus, that could be the character's lens that we're viewing. And that's part of probably the problem that I referenced earlier, where the perspective we get is this person who's impacted by an autistic child rather than giving us the autistic child. I think if we were in Robin's brain here, we might see a lot of his wonder and empathy and see him try to make connections with these people that have differing opinions and conflict with them. But I think that is a big problem, and even the point of the title is a reference to a line in the book that is specifically talking about that us versus them thinking, and for me that really contradicts exactly what the book is trying to do. So that just didn't work for me. So the second really big problem that I have a criticism of is that this is not actually accessible, I feel, to a reader who is not already in the worldview of this book. And I don't think it's pretension by any means. It does not feel that way to me. It feels like the author genuinely thinks that things like exoplanets and Fermi's paradox are really simple, accessible concepts that don't need to be explained to the reader. And that's absurd. Yeah, that's absurd. You can't do that for a general reader. So this is littered with things like that. The stance, the character, the access that character has are all things that are only going to be accessible to a very narrow target of readers. And this reached me. I am that target reader who is familiar with the concepts, who completely agrees with the ideology and worldview of this book, and was nodding right along. And it set me thinking great new thoughts about things. It really gave me a lot of ideas. So as a literary work, I see a lot of merit there for its very narrow target readership. I do not think that this is going to convince anyone of anything. It's going to be great for readers who already agree with it. And so that boils down to what you think the point and the intent of the book are. So yeah, I valued the reading experience, but I think it's not a generally applicable book. So if you are not that reader, I would probably not recommend it to you. Yeah, so looping back around to what I said at the beginning, I think in wrapping up, I did strongly enjoy this book. I think it has some beautiful writing. I think it has some really interesting concepts. And overall, I really strongly enjoyed it. So I am going to wrap up there and then give you one massive spoiler for any readers who maybe don't mind spoilers or just want to confirm what the book is really about in terms of the story and structure. Yeah, so if you are dropping off, thank you so much for watching. If not, hang in there for a big spoiler. So, spoiler time. Big spoiler. This is effectively a retelling of Flowers for Algernon. And not only that, it references Flowers for Algernon at the beginning, and Robin references it later at the end as he realizes that he is devolving. Because the training that he has had has helped him gain hyper empathy, and he has resolved all his behavioral problems really, and is just this wondrous kid. And then the big bad government comes in and shuts down the program. And so that appears as a caricature at times. And I didn't find that very effective. It seemed really unnecessary to me. So yeah, so that is the big spoiler. Do with it what you will. Thanks for watching.